It is a tremendous opportunity, a great honor to be able to interview today Councilman Steve Adams. He is the Riverside City Councilman of Ward 7. He's also a candidate for US Congress this coming November in the election for District 41. This interview is focused on issues of particular concern for the faith community, focused on religious freedom and other moral issues. We issued an invitation to Congressman Mark Takano to join us for this interview. He declined that invitation, and we're continuing with this interview very thankfully with Mr. Adams. Steve, thank you for being with us.
Father Josiah, thank you so much for this opportunity. I appreciate it.
I'd like to start with the question of religious freedom, especially religious freedom as it is playing out on the international scene. In the last month, the world has witnessed the terrifying, I think that's a good description of it, the terrifying eclipse of religious liberty in parts of Iraq and Syria that have been overtaken by the Islamic State. Tens of thousands of Christians native to those countries in Iraq and Syria, and other religious minorities also, have fled for their lives. Many Christians have been beheaded, brutally martyred in the most grotesque ways. We've witnessed this terrible persecution of Christians throughout the Middle East, especially last year in Egypt when Coptic Orthodox Christians were made the scapegoats for the civil unrest surrounding the Muslim Brotherhood in that country. Christians are also suffering tremendous persecution from Muslim jihadis in numerous African countries like Sudan and Nigeria. But we don't hear much about this from our government here in the United States. Instead, our government keeps pushing its own agendas for social transformation and gay rights and Western sexual anarchy onto the African nations that aren't particularly interested in our own chaos, even threatening these nations with a cessation of humanitarian aid if they don't comply with our social programs. It seems to many that America has lost its traditional values and is offering only a deafening silence in the face of such injustices against Christians throughout the world. And even Russia, just 25 years ago a communist nation, has been boldly of late speaking up in defense of persecuted Christians, but still we have almost nothing from the United States. Steve, what should be the response of the American government to these injustices?
Well, I'm extremely concerned with the war on Christianity here and abroad. I think when they saw us, the degradation of how we deal with Christianity here in America, when they see it declining, it emboldened them in these foreign countries where they are taking action. These are countries we have either allied with or provide some form of aid to, and before they saw us change the way we deal with things, they honored, at least to a certain point, the difference between Muslim, Christian, Islamic, and what have you, and allowed them to live fairly well in peace. As they saw the United States step away from our convictions of freedom of religion, our First Amendment right, particularly, excuse me, in Christianity, I believe that's where you started to see a growth of the attack outside of this country. What we see here has got to stop, got to change. How does one turn off their religion, their belief, just because you own a business or because you go to work? You don't do that. You can't do that. The basis of what made this nation great is the freedom of religion. Our Judeo-Christian background, which is the most generous, most compassionate in the world. No other nation on earth, no other government on earth has done what the United States of America has done under the guise of freedom of religion and respecting religion and separating government from religion. But over the many years, both sides are doing this. I blame both sides. They have slowly but surely indoctrinated the people that government is more important than parents and God. And I think that when we can resort back or start to return back to where we are, our founding fathers, where those are the people that lived in tyranny, that came here and said these are the things in the Constitution to protect us from tyranny. We know what got us here. We know how to keep it from coming back. And the further and further we go away from the guidelines of that Constitution and we lose respect for our Judeo-Christian backgrounds, I think you see a worldwide expansion, exponential expansion of cruelty, of murder, of rape, of taking down churches, of running people away from their homes, That's, I think, when they saw us weaken our stand, it emboldened them in their stand.
Steve, should you win election to the United States Congress, and you had an opportunity in that capacity to speak to this issue, would you have any problem speaking up specifically, asking our government to defend Christians abroad or to work against the persecution of Christians? Would you have any problem doing that?
No, not at all. I mean, that's, as a human being, that's what you should be doing.
Sure.
But we, we're the most charitable, compassionate nation on earth, and we've turned our back on one of our founding goals or our missions, is that of freedom of speech, or freedom of, which includes the freedom of church. So yeah, we have to fight to get that back. That's absolutely the fundamental basis of this nation. And as you saw that creep away and start to deteriorate and erode, look at all the other things that followed behind it. Overregulation of government. Government has stepped into the home. Government tells your children when they go to school, you don't have to adhere to what your parents tell you. We take care of you. We won't even tell your parents. We are more important than your parents. And now they think they're almost, if not, more important than God. And that has to stop. That has to be reversed. We have to restore what makes America great.
You mentioned religious freedom issues here as well as abroad, and I'm wondering if we can speak a little bit more about the particular challenges to religious freedom that we're experiencing, to the shock of many Americans right here in the homeland. Many Americans sense that religious freedom in our country is under assault, and that the First Amendment, which was designed to protect religion from the state, is being ignored. Ironically, many politicians today and many judges are redefining the First Amendment in order to banish religious influence of the churches on the state, as though the church no longer should issue moral guidance or have a strong public voice on issues, which is very rare today, but very traditional in American history. 2 years ago in our own city, the city of Riverside endured the threat of litigation from the Washington, D.C. activist group Americans United for the Separation of Church and State for maintaining our historic Sarah Cross on top of Mount Rubidoux. And even more ominous has been the HHH healthcare mandate, the Affordable Care Act, which has attempted to require all employers, including Christian ministries, hospitals, and universities, to provide abortion and contraception and sterilization services as basic health care to their employees. Every day, every week, every month, it seems that more legislation is coming from the government to abolish the right of Americans to live as faithful Christians in their own businesses, as though when they leave their home, they have to leave their faith at home, or when they cross the threshold into their business, they have to hang their conscience outside and follow the new ethics of the United States government. Government has also attempted recently to provide a new definition of religious freedom, that being that Christians or people of whatever particular faith are free to worship the way they want within the four walls of their church, instead of the traditional Christian definition that a person of faith should be able to live according to his or her faith without molestation in commerce or in the public square. I'm wondering about those things. I'm also thinking about the IRS's involvement targeting specifically faith-based organizations for special surveillance and other things. Steve, you are a former businessman yourself, and I'm wondering if you can speak to this question about the compromise of religious freedom within our country. What do you think specifically about the mandates that the federal government through the Health Care Act have put upon Americans?
Well, again, I think this progressivism that started maybe 40, 50 years ago, the biggest push to me is that it was trying to get people more dependent on government. And then that group of people has more power and control over your life. Some people may think that makes for a better America. It doesn't. The independence of the individual is what makes America great, and has made us the most powerful nation on earth. But we're now rescinding. It seems to be over the last few years they weren't getting as far as they wanted to, so they've hurried it up. And when we say we separate church from state, we have religious beliefs. We'll say gay marriage is one. The people voted, said no. That wasn't the answer they wanted. So government has come in through the use of courts and are reversing the will of the majority of people. Not the individual, not the person and by religion, but we're going to take away your rights as a voter. We've taken away your rights of freedom of religion. And I just see it going further and further down, as we spoke earlier on the previous question. When they saw us weak and here, that it emboldened those overseas that were intimidated by the way America stood behind freedom of religion and supported their people and kept those attacks in those countries where they provide or have influence from going in that direction. We have lost that, or we're losing it. Yeah, I'm very, very concerned about the government's push and involvement. Again, like I said earlier, first they said we replaced your parents. Now they're saying we're replacing your God. And I don't know exactly how we have to reverse that, but we do. I think we're starting to see people with these other issues, IRS, NSA spying, and now the Affordable Care Act, and the outreaches of that maybe people have finally hit that wall and said, you know, the pendulum's gone too far. We need to come back to our God. We need to come back to our beliefs. We need to come back to our Constitution. All of those things in our Constitution based on, like we said earlier, Judeo-Christian beliefs, it's essential. And I've watched it deteriorate, and I've watched the government accelerate it because they weren't getting to where they needed to go. Technology has forced some of that acceleration. Uncontrolled abuse of the Constitution has accelerated that. And I think that we need to get a hand on it. And people need to think about when they vote, that's their voice. That's their one chance. That's the most powerful entity in government, is the vote, the individual vote. Please make your statement be heard, your wishes be heard, your will be heard, because you're losing your rights. And people have been lulled in it. It's been a slow, long road to get here.
Can I ask you, if you are elected to the Congress, would you be resolved to make adjustments to the Affordable Care Act now in order to protect the conscience rights of American citizens?
I actually would like to see it rescinded. I've met with doctors, I've met with patients, I've met with professional health care providers. It is a broken entity. It is not good for this country for many reasons, including the religious input that they've gone into in overreach. And so I'm adamantly supporting rescinding the Affordable Care Act. They've pushed off like the employer mandate so that you won't really see the total negative impact. But if you're a small business owner, I am, we're all living right on the edge. It's kind of like your home balance, with particularly with this recession and it's continuing in a slow recovery, if it is a recovery. That when they add these things on it, you're putting those people out of business, which forces more people on to the dependency of government, not freedom. We were supposed to be one nation independent, and now we're one nation dependent. And we've been divided by, we separate Christians from Muslims, from rich, from middle income from the poor.
Sure.
This separation of the people to get that infighting so government goes uncontrolled over here nebulously. Yes, I will fight that.
Steve, let's say you're elected to Congress. You go to Congress, but the Affordable Care Act is not overturned. Still, we have the question of facing people of faith in this country. Nurses are being asked to participate in medical procedures that are immoral in many hospitals, especially state-affiliated hospitals. Doctors are being accused of abandoning their patients medically if they don't prescribe birth control pills to teenagers or don't refer for abortions. Pharmacists are being asked to distribute the morning after pill regardless of their faith commitments. We have a screaming need for the protection of conscience rights in our country, whether or not the entirety of the Affordable Care Act is overthrown. And so I'm asking you really on behalf of people of faith who have these kind of convictions, would you fight, if the ACA was not overturned, would you nevertheless attempt to secure conscience protection rights for people of faith?
Absolutely. You know, it's disinformation that they put out, that if I own a pharmacy and I choose not to provide those things, you haven't lost access to it. There's 1,000 other places where you can go get it. We're not denying you access. You're taking my rights away. and you're not giving anybody new rights that they didn't have because they can go across the street, next door, wherever, you will find those that are willing to supply it. Why would you ever step into the religious belief of any individual and say you have to violate that belief when you've not denied people access to those things if they want them? It's just we're going after that one person, that individual, religion, Christianity. That's what they're going after.
Yes.
And that has to be stopped. We have to restore back to the very common denominator of the individual. And then when we protected the individual, we have protected the whole. We haven't denied these people access to those things they want. We've just not said, we're saying now you have to provide them whether they want to or not, regardless of what your beliefs are. That's an easy fix. It should be an easy fix. It should be a common sense fix, but we know that common sense doesn't prevail in Washington, D.C. But that would be my argument, because they always say if you deny it, nobody gets it anywhere. And that is not the fact.
If I could, I'd like to move to perhaps the most contentious moral issue in America today, ever since the Supreme Court decision Roe versus Wade in 1973. Our nation, by an act of judicial fiat, declared that abortion in all 3 trimesters up until the very day of delivery is legal and must be legal in all 50 states in America. This did not end the controversy in abortion. This act of the Supreme Court, in fact, simply stirred it up, and we see that this is a very live issue. The pro-life cause and the abortion debate is more active today than at any time in American history. In just the last few years, pollsters have told us that, in fact, now a majority of Americans self-identify as pro-life and are asking for some limitation, at least with regards to late-term abortion, be made in our legal system. And this is a particular concern for pastors, both Catholic, Orthodox, Evangelical, LDS. This is a real unifying issue for most people of faith in America. And would you speak to us, where do you stand on the issue of abortion, Steve?
Well, I'm opposed to abortion. I'm a father, a parent. I don't know how anybody's ever held their child. Or like this morning, you held the child of a beautiful baby. This morning, how could you even think that that's the appropriate route to go? There are incidents, the mother's life is in danger or something of that nature. It just as a blanket birth control method. And again, this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where government has stepped in between the parents and their children. And said, disregard what they say. Disregard what you've heard at your church and what your faith is. Go out, have a good time. They'll even show you what you have to do, help you get there. And then if something happens, well, we'll just take it right down the street and get it taken care of. Mom and Dad doesn't even get to know. And I think that's probably singularly the one thing you can point to that is the biggest step of overreach by government into the home and into the church that has to be stopped. I think it's the disgrace of our nation. I understand that there's times when it will be done, but just the blanket, anytime, any place, anywhere. I think when we've lost how precious human life is, then what's left?
Indeed.
Certainly, what's left. Look. I'm not sure you can separate it, but look what's going on overseas where they're beheading children.
Yes.
Because life has no meaning.
Yes.
So when you get there, what's the next step?
Yes. I saw a horrifying video and some pictures of the heads of Christians in Iraq, that these poor Christians had been beheaded by ISIS, and they had lined their heads up as a promotional propaganda piece, a real sign of total, utter barbarism. And I thought, while I was watching it, it reminded me of several decades ago when I used to do a lot of pro-life activism, the body parts of unborn children that we found in the garbage cans of our local Planned Parenthood. And I thought to myself, what an irony that the whole nation would be able to look at these decapitated heads and recognize that for barbarism. But in our own country, we're doing this on a regular basis to unborn children, and we're covering it. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to acknowledge it for the barbaric act that it is, really as a form of birth control, which is the purpose of the vast majority of abortions today in America. If you are elected to the US Congress, would you vote consistently in favor of pro-life legislation?
Yes, I'm proud to actually be supported by pro-life organizations, including Right to Life.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's who I am. It's what I believe in. Again, when you've lost how precious and valuable life is, I don't know what's left. That's
yes.
To me, that's the last step, because
Steve, would you support the reversal of the Supreme Court decision on Roe versus Wade?
Yes.
If I can, I'd like to move us to our last issue, which is an issue that is confronting all 50 states today. And this is the issue of the redefinition of marriage, the negation of the traditional American and universal religious and civilizational definition of marriage between a man and a woman. 6 years ago in our own state here, in California, our Supreme Court decided that the traditional definition in our state constitution of marriage between a man and a woman was not constitutional, in fact. And here, even though California is considered to be the most liberal state in the Union, still over 7 million.
I agree with that statement.
even 7 million Californians said no to that form of judicial activism. And in passing Proposition 8, supported the traditional definition of a man and a woman. In this district, in this county, in fact, Proposition 8 passed by a greater percentage than in any other place in the state of California. So your potential constituency in a very recent vote is very supportive of marriage and of the right for every child to have a mother and a father. And yet, this state after state of late has been changing that definition. Steve, would you tell us what is your position on the subject of same-sex marriage, and how would you vote on that subject?
I did vote, and I voted for traditional marriage, and I will continue to vote for traditional marriage. I think, again, we keep coming back to this push away from our core beliefs, so that government can get more control. That when we voted, we even had the vote, and the people made a statement, and that wasn't expeditional as to what they wanted. So they used the court system to take away the people's vote. We're taking away your religion. Now we're even taking away your other rights and of the vote. There are remedies for gay couples, civil unions, civil unions. They will be able to empower the same rights, all the things that you do as a married couple. But a married couple, to me, I don't know how many thousands of years old that is that to provide our future generations. The husband and the wife, they bear their children, they raise their children, hopefully without government interference, and they make great young people with entrepreneurs or mechanics or doctors or whoever they get to become. And that's the core of family. And that's the core of this nation. That's the core of every country there is. I don't know where any country isn't of that same thought. And yet, this goes back to the degradation of our core beliefs. Why do they have to call it marriage? They call gay. Yeah. It's a husband and wife, their children, hopefully a family unit that stays together. They have a civil union that answers all of their needs and questions. They don't want that separation of, we're just like you, we're normal like you. I'm not saying you're not normal. This is not that. I can't pick up an apple and call it an orange and make it an orange. It's
sure.
not. It's not an orange.
Sure.
So that is my belief. That's the way I was raised, and I believe that provides the best opportunity for success in our next generations. And currently, I believe we're going to be the first generation of this country to leave it worse off than it was when we found it. And all of this goes back to that we've walked away from our core beliefs. We've allowed government to overreach, interfere, overstep in every aspect of life. We need to get government out of our life, go back to who we are as a people, a compassionate people, an innovative people, and a great nation. And I think that's my belief of where we are and how we got there.
You know, I'm very pleased to hear your belief, Steve. I would just point out that that belief that you just articulated if it's held by a common person in America today, is enough to get them fired. You can ask Phil Robertson of Duck Dynasty about that. It's enough to make you have to resign. You can ask Brendan Eich of Mozilla, the CEO of Mozilla, who simply because he supported Proposition 8 was forced into a labor situation with Mozilla in which he had to resign.
Right.
You know, GLAAD, the largest and most activist gay lobby group in America, would like people who have your convictions not to be able to work in America. This is hardly a classically liberal position. This is a group that promoted the concept of tolerance to get what they want, and then have now blown all discussion of tolerance right out the window.
Tolerant if you only believe what they believe and only do what they do.
Oof.
If you step outside of that, then you are in violation. And there is an intolerance and an anger and a violence and a hate. You've seen it. But the one thing, Duck Dynasty, I think that was good. The people spoke up and said, no,
yes, they did.
You're not throwing that gentleman out. That's how he believes, and that's his right, and that's his faith. We're not taking that away from him or anybody else. You know, the unintended consequences. How many times have you heard that? When liberalism does things because it's emotional, it sounds good, it feels good, then when it's implemented, no matter how much damage it does, well, that was an unintended consequence. But I did something nice for somebody,
yes,
and 2 people benefited, 1 million people suffered. But okay. So I think that's a real problem, because we as conservatives and Christians are more concerned about the whole picture. How do we heal your faith, your heart, your soul? Have we given you the opportunity? And that's what America was supposed to be about and is about. We just got to restore it, not fundamentally change it. Restore it is opportunity. We promise you the opportunity. If you're willing to do it, you will have the opportunity to complete it and have the success you want.
Steve, I'm really thankful that you would entertain this interview and answer questions. I really wish that Congressman Takano also could be here, and I hope that he'll find a way to address these questions of particular interest to the clergy and to the faith community. These are issues about religious freedom, unborn children and abortion, and same-sex marriage that are really pressing. And they're the subject of so much litigation today in government that anyone running for office, especially the high office of US Congress, needs to answer. So I'm very thankful that you did this, and I wish you all the best.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I thank you for this interview, because it's important that people know who you are and where you stand. They need to make a sound decision. What we need is leadership, not those that will step in and just follow the lead of their party leaders. This country, as we've just talked about, is sloping in the wrong direction. And I want to restore us back to the greatness we once had, the compassion we once gave, and the freedom, opportunity we gave the world. If you were looking for freedom, you could turn to the United States and they would stand there with you and help you go forward. Now we've alienated all of our allies, we've emboldened all of our enemies, and the world is on the brink. I'm telling you, the United States is the answer. It is that shining light. We've just got a cover over it. We need to pull the cover off and get back to where we belong.
I hope you have enjoyed this interview, and if it has been of profit to you, I would encourage you to share it with a friend, share it with your pastor, and make sure that you're well informed about the coming election in November. God bless you.